How's it going, everybody? My name is Torisaurus, and welcome to my last vlog about my time abroad. This is number 17. I'm gonna go ahead and apologize for background noises you may hear. The house isn't empty, and I have two dogs. Like, that's Vixen right now, playing with a stuffed tick. So, I will try to keep that at a minimum. Hey, stop. Can you wait like 30 minutes? No? This is Vixen. If you hear noise, it's probably her. Right? Can you sit and be good? Do you want to be in the vlog? Nope? Okay. So my goal is to talk about what flying back was like, and also kind of try to summarize my thoughts on the trip as a whole, which I'm not sure if I'll be able to, so I'll do my best. Flying back was not as much of a mess as flying into the UK, thankfully, but it was definitely interesting. We had to leave, our flight was at 7 a.m. on the 23rd, but we had to leave the evening of the 22nd because St. Andrews is about an hour and 15 minutes away from the airport in Edinburgh where we were leaving from, so we had to leave the night before. There was no way we would be able to catch a bus or any kind of shuttle early enough in the morning to get there for a 7 a.m. flight. We thought we were going to be able to take public transportation, but they had a baggage limit and we had a lot of baggage. And then we were going to try to book a particular shuttle company, but that didn't work out because we didn't book it enough in advance. And the only opening they had was at 2:45 in the morning, day of. We ended up booking an airport shuttle via a cab company that provided that kind of service. And it was a little more expensive than we were intending, but it ended up working out really nicely because we didn't have to go to a pickup point and we didn't have to worry about getting all our luggage to fit because it was in advance. We told them how much we had, and so they brought a car that was an appropriate size for us to get there, and it was really nice because we didn't have to share it with anybody else. So that ended up working out pretty nicely. Oh, and before I get to that part, we started packing, and I finished, well, we both finished like kind of last minute, but we took a break to get dinner. We went to get Subway for dinner. It had been raining, but it was bright out, so I didn't think too much about trying to dress for how I was going to dress for the airport because I was intending on wearing my big heavy boots, and I had compression shorts under my jeans because I knew it was going to be hot in Virginia when we landed, so I wanted to be able to just take my jeans off and be able to not melt when I was in the car. And I had a pullover sweater on, so dressed kind of warmly, but we were going out and I didn't want to wear my boots because I knew I'd overheat for sure, so I put on flip-flops, which was a big mistake because all the sidewalks in St. Andrews are slate. So my over 2 years old flip-flops don't have grips on the bottom anymore, and I slipped and fell once, and then I slipped and almost fell at least 8 more times. It was the worst. We actually grabbed a cab to get back to our dorm from town. It was like a 4-pound ride, but it was worth it because I thought I was gonna die. I couldn't not slip. There was no way to avoid not slipping unless I took my shoes off, and the street is disgusting because there's bird poop everywhere, so that was not gonna happen. That was not an option for me. But we lived, we finally got back, and we really quickly finished packing our carry-ons and got our suitcases downstairs so that our driver could help us load his car. And we headed off, I think it was about 7 p.m. and maybe a little before. Yeah, I think it was a little before. And we got to the airport around 8, and we got carts to load all of our luggage onto. After we loaded the carts with our luggage, we paid the guy and gave him a tip and figured out where to go into the airport because obviously we landed in Edinburgh when we arrived in Scotland, but we didn't exactly spend a lot of time there, so we had to get some directions to figure out where to go. I had been able to check in online to pick seats and that kind of thing, but Dallas wasn't able to for some reason, and we couldn't figure out why. We called, and they couldn't help us, of course. And so when we got into the airport, we found a kiosk where we could check in for British Airways, and Dallas tried to check in there, and it wouldn't let her. So finally we found the actual people who did the check-ins. We found their desk, and so, or desks, I don't know what you want to call it, stations, I guess. And we did a twilight check-in, which it turned out Dallas had been flagged randomly selected for extra security checks. Joyous occasion. And so they were also having technical difficulties, and I don't know if it was worsened by the fact that she, what did they call her, a selectee? She was a selectee for security checks. I don't know, but they were having some technical difficulties, and whether it was associated with her being a selectee or not, I don't know. But we stood there for, I think, over an hour. It took an hour, 2 women that worked at British Airways, and them calling some kind of technical support. But finally, we got Dallas checked in. We got our seats next to each other on both of our flights, and we were ready to go. We just had to get our luggage checked, which I knew was going to be a problem because we both had 2 very large suitcases that were the maximum size that they could be. And I also had to bring a box with me because, stupid me, forgot that mail doesn't send on Sundays. I had no way to mail this box home because I had no one I could leave it with that I trusted enough to give money to pay for it, and it was a mess. It was a complete mess. But my mom was like, just take it to the airport, pay for it to get checked, it'll be fine. So I brought it with me. And after the hour of dealing with trying to get Dallas checked and her seats picked and our seats put together, the best thing that could have possibly happened, and I am not being sarcastic, the literal best thing happened. The younger lady that was helping us was the one we had originally talked to about checking in, and she had called over a colleague to get assistance with Dallas being a selectee and then whatever technical issues they were having. I think they were switching systems, but she was the original one we were dealing with. And after we finally got our seats settled and got our boarding passes printed, she waived all the fees for our baggage. And it was so nice because Dallas had 1 additional bag that she was going to have to pay for. I had 2 additional bags and an overweight bag. So between the 2 of us, it would have cost probably $400+ to get all of our baggage home, not to mention the fee we already had to incur to switch our flight, which I talked about previously. And I still don't like British Airways. I will do whatever I can to never fly them again, but amazing props and kudos to that girl for being the best kind of person. She was just a really nice person who took it upon herself to make at least one aspect of international travel a little easier. And I couldn't be more thankful. Her company, on the other hand, which is obviously not a reflection of her in any way, but British Airways, I know my mom watches these, so I can only say but so much, but good grief, get your act together. Anytime that we had to call for service, it never failed, it always went to a call center in India. Getting call centers is not a problem for me if it's every once in a while or if it's because I'm calling at a weird time, except in this instance, it was every time we called, and it was a huge barrier because English was not ever the person's first language, and it made communicating really, really difficult. And clearly they have just outsourced all of their technical support and customer service positions to a call center in India. That's not okay. Are you kidding me? If I was in India calling British Airways and I was connected to an Indian call center, perfect. If I selected an Indian language as my language because I needed to speak that and I got an Indian call center, that would be perfect. But I'm neither of those things. And so it was really, really difficult trying to get anything done or anything changed or any kind of help, because when Dallas called, we had to use my Skype credit, but when she called, he was the least helpful person. We had to almost try to coerce him into trying to change her seats, and even then that didn't stick, and it had to be changed again when we checked in person. And he couldn't give us any answers about anything. He just kept telling us, this is a technical difficulty, there's nothing wrong with your scheduled flights and blah blah. And we were like, no, we understand that it's a technical difficulty. The technical difficulty is our issue that we're having. But he had no way of even trying to help us a little bit other than just repeating himself and telling us, yeah, there's nothing wrong with your flight. There's nothing wrong on your end. You're fine. Just go check in person. We were an hour away, and I thought for sure there was going to be no one there to do an early check-in when we got to Edinburgh. We lucked out. And it was luck that girl that helped us was nice enough to do what she did. Done. I'm done with that airline. I don't recommend that airline. Just no. But enough about that. We got our bags checked, and after that we went to, there was a Starbucks right by where the check-in was, and we stayed there for 7 hours because it was a 24-hour Starbucks that was in the airport. And we just sat at one of the tables and we played Rummy for 7 hours. If you don't know, Rummy is just a card game. It's really, really fun. You can play with 2 to probably 6 people. Although if you have more than 4, I don't know if one deck of cards would be enough. But it's just a really, really fun strategy game. Your goal is to just get the most points and get rid of all the cards in your hand. And we played that because I had a deck of cards in my bag from, I think it was about 9:30 until about 5 in the morning with almost no breaks. We each got a coffee when we first sat down, and then after several hours, I went and bought us 2 teas and Stroop waffles, which I had never had before, but they're these little, they look like waffles, but the texture is more like a cracker, I guess, but not savory. It's sweet, and it's like 2, and sandwiched in the middle is caramel. What was weird about it was they actually tasted cinnamony. I'm not a huge fan of cinnamon, but if you like cinnamon, try a Stroop waffle. I don't know if they're all made the same, but the ones at Starbucks tasted kind of like a Cinnabon, almost. Is the best way I can think to describe them. But yeah, our only breaks were bathroom breaks. If we thought of a subject to talk about, which we could talk and play at the same time, so that almost never stopped us. It was usually if one of us had come back from a bathroom break and the other had been on their phone and seen something, we would talk about it for a couple minutes and then go back to playing Rummy. So yeah, we played from 9:30 or so until about 5 in the morning, and the only reason we left at 5 was because a couple came in and they had a baby that was really fussy, which neither Dallas or I are fond of children, but particularly loud ones that are really, really close are going to pass on being around that if I have another option. So we decided to get up and go ahead and go through security because at that time it should have been close enough for us to be able to do that, and it was. So we grabbed all our things, and security wasn't too difficult. It's always really, well, I mean, obviously it's terrible going through security, but it always gives me anxiety because there's always so many people, and they're always making you go as fast as humanly possible. But I always feel like I'm gonna forget something, or something's gonna get stolen, or it's just terrible. And because Dallas was a selectee, she had to be pulled aside to go through additional security. It's never a fun time going through airport security. But we made it. Particularly, forgot to mention this, I obviously, well, maybe you didn't know this. If you watch my Let's Plays, you may or may not know this, but I traveled internationally with 2 laptops. And that was the dumbest thing I could have possibly done. It was such a bad idea. When you go through airport security, you have to pull your laptops out. And normally it's a non-issue if you have just one, but I had 2. One was in, like, I had a small suitcase as my carry-on, and when you open the lid, there's usually like a mesh pocket on the top. And so one laptop was in there, and the other one, because I have this microphone, which I still have the styrofoam from the box when I ordered it. That's how I traveled with it, because I really don't want it to get messed up. My Mac couldn't sit on top of it and the lid closed, so my Mac had to be on the bottom, but going through security, I had to pull it out, and that messed everything else that was stacked on top of it. Yeah, that never really got reorganized. So we went through security, and we had to wait to find out when our flight was, because we were a little too early. We had to wait like 20 minutes, I think it was. So we actually just went to a bar and had the last drink that we could have legally. We're turning 21, both of us, this August, but in the UK, you only have to be 18, so we just went to a bar. So that's how we killed time, waiting for our gate to be listed, because we were too early. And then we headed on over and caught the plane, which, oddly enough, it's not often that you board a plane anymore from the ground, as opposed to like a walkway tunnel directly to the hatch door of the plane. But it was actually a set of stairs that were let down, and we had to go outside and go up the stairs. So the only other time I think I've done that was when I flew to Alaska, I think, because I don't remember doing that on the way to the UK. I believe I have a picture or two from that flight that I will put here if I have them. If I don't, I'm sorry. I had fully intended on trying to vlog in the airport, but the timing was never good, and eventually it got to the point where I was too tired to be motivated to do it. So yeah, I don't really have too many pictures or videos or anything from during the period of travel. That flight went okay. It lasted about an hour, and we got breakfast on it, so that was nice. And then we had to wait. I think our layover time was about 2 hours or so, because the flight was at 7 and it left pretty much on time. And we would have landed at 8, and our other flight was like 10:30. Actual wait time was probably only an hour or so, because it takes time to get, you know, to the gate you need to go to, etc. I mean, you've probably, if you're watching this, traveled in an airport. We landed in Heathrow. Heathrow sucks. If you've never been in Heathrow, it's an experience. The closest American airport I've been in that I can describe that is similar to it would be the Atlanta airport. It's just always crowded and always a pain, because if you're in there as an American, you're probably traveling internationally, and dealing with international security is a bummer and terrible. Which we didn't actually have to go through security in Heathrow, but we did when we got back in Dulles. In Heathrow, I'm trying to remember, because you've probably noticed it's been I believe it's been exactly a week. Let me check, I don't want to lie. A week and a day since I traveled. I didn't want to take this long to make this video, but part of why this is so delayed is because I had to take time to adjust being back in the States. And it wasn't even time zone, it was just exhaustion. So it took a day or two to recover from that. And then Dallas stayed until yesterday. She left. And so I didn't want to be a jerk and play video games or vlog or do one-person activities and exclude her, because that's Rude, why would you do that? And also because Memorial Day, there's always been someone else in the house. My brother's here currently, but he's asleep in his room, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to try to do this vlog. But I'm also having trouble remembering exactly what happened because I've been really bad about keeping up with my journal, apparently since about May 3rd, which I didn't realize it had been that long, so I'm gonna have to try to play catch up somehow. And all this stalling has not helped. I can't think of anything that we did in between landing in Heathrow and leaving Heathrow. I can't think of what happened in between that span of time because I'm pretty sure it wasn't much. There was still a delay for finding out our gate. We had to wait a couple minutes for that. Heathrow has a tram system, and you have to take the tram to get to, like, the set of A gates, the set of B gates, and the set of C gates. So our flight was in C terminal, I think is what it's called. And so we had to take the tram to there, to the C terminal, and then we had to wait for what specific gate it was when we got there. And we just, like, waited an hour. Our flight was actually really crowded, and we were last aboard because Dallas was a selectee, and she had to get patted down by this not so friendly looking woman who, before patting her down, held her hands out and was like, "May I touch you?" And it was pretty creepy. The plane was really big. It was like an Airbus, and it was one of those planes where it was 2 decks. The deck we were on had rows of 3 seats, 4 in the middle, and then 3 on the other side of the outside. So we had to share with one person we didn't know who seemed kind of surly. She didn't seem to be happy about flying, and I don't know if it was a function of she hates flying or she was grumpy for other reasons, but she had, I think, 5 little miniature travel bottles of wine or more. I wasn't counting because I slept on that flight, but Dallas says she had a lot, and I believe it. It was okay. I sat in the middle for the first little while until Dallas had to run to the restroom, and then I scooted to the inside because Dallas couldn't sleep, and so she let me borrow her pillow, and I slept in and out on that flight. But we did get meals, so that was nice. I mean, they were gross, but it was nice that they provided meals because of the time of day. It was kind of a weird time to provide food. They came by with dinner, even though the flight left at 10:30 and it was probably 12:30 when they came by with that. The worst decision an airline could make, I'll leave it to British Airways, was serving Indian food on that flight. It was chicken korma, and not only was it bad because it was industrial mass-produced version of chicken korma, but they put red peppers in there. like I don't know what kind of pepper it was, but when you cut the cross section of a spicy pepper like a jalapeno and it's like you see it and there's all the seeds in there, it was a fire blood red version of that, and it was hella spice. I don't deal with spice that well. I didn't do anything on the plane, thankfully, but I'm sure other people had trouble with it because they don't tell you when they're going around with food. They're like, here's the vegetarian option, here's the chicken option. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go with the chicken option. It's spicy. Why wouldn't, that drove me crazy. Why wouldn't you ask if people have an issue with spice? I am spicy intolerant for the most part, and that was not okay. Also, it tasted terrible. And yes, I know there are lots of jokes about airline food being terrible, but generally speaking, I think it's about a C+. But that was bad. After that, which the dessert cup was chocolate ganache, and I thought it was gonna be ganache based, or I don't know. I didn't think it would literally be just a cup of essentially icing. What? What? I don't know what the deal was with the food on that flight, but it was actually bad. It was actually really, 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 really terrible. After that, I conked back out, fell asleep, and I woke up a couple times to readjust, and then I was woken up because they came around with sandwiches. I thought it was tuna, so I didn't eat it, but I also wasn't hungry, so I wasn't worried about it. I think Dallas told me later it was chicken Caesar. I slept until the last 45 minutes or hour or so, where I pretty much just was up listening to music. Yeah, I did get a video of the plane landing, so I can show that here. It actually wasn't too terrible landing in Dulles and having to deal with all the security because I'm an American citizen landing in America. They really don't care at that point. I got off the plane. The worst part was we had to get off the plane and then ride a shuttle, which felt like a sardine can on wheels. It was pretty terrible because it took a long time to wait to get on, to wait to get there, to wait to get off. And then we finally got in line to go through customs before we could get our baggage. Customs wasn't too bad. It was kind of weird though. On international flights, you'll get this piece of paper and you have to fill it out with your information and declare anything you brought into the country. But when we got back, they didn't want that piece of paper. There was a kiosk, kind of like an ATM, where you filled out a basic version of the same questions, and then you kept a slip that it printed out with your picture on it. I don't know why it needed your picture when you have several other forms, presumably, of identification on you. I didn't understand it, but your picture was also on there. Which, fun fact, my webcam that I'm using right now was the camera that they used in those machines. I thought that was crazy. It was cool. We had to wait after we got that slip that it printed out to talk to a real person, which was okay. If you go back and watch my vlog on what going through customs in the UK was like, it was terrible. I got grilled. It was bad. In the US, I walked up. The guy looked dead inside, but he asked where I had been, what I had been there for. Hello. And did I bring anything back? So I told him Scotland for study abroad, and I brought back a bottle of scotch and some store-bought cookies. And he was like, okay. So thorough. I could have told him nothing. He would have believed me. So it was super easy, and all the baggage and the time it took to disembark and go through all the baggage had pretty much been taken off the plane. The only thing we had to wait for was my box, which survived the trip miraculously. Nothing broke, nothing shattered, nothing even a little messed up, except for the outside of the box was a little torn up. But who cares about that? It was great. It was actually pretty seamless. We had to get carts again for our baggage because too much. And we just made our way out, had to wait in a line to show our passport to one last security person, and then got out of there. And my parents were there waiting for Dallas and I, and we made our merry way home, which took about 2 hours because I live kind of far from Dulles, so that sucked. But it was nice to be back in a car with family and be able to sing along to music, and it was great. We went to Buffalo Wild Wings that night for dinner at my request, and it was delicious. So that was what traveling back was like. Not too bad as far as international travel goes. I haven't really done too much since I've been home. My friend Matt has come over twice. I've played and purchased Uncharted 4 and Doom, which has been fun. We went to see The Jungle Book yesterday. No, day before yesterday. And Dallas left yesterday. So it hasn't been too jam-packed or anything like that. But yeah, that's it. That's where I'm at now. As far as a summary of my time in St. Andrews, however, I've been trying to think about what to say or how best to talk about my time there. But the truth is, I don't know. Because I have some conflicting feelings about it. The UK is obviously really different from America, and I anticipated that. And I adjusted pretty decently to it. I enjoyed the country itself. Going to the Hebrides was amazing, even though I didn't get to be there for very long. And I had a really great time experiencing Scotland. My issues with the school, however, have definitely altered my perception of St. Andrews as an institution. I don't want to generalize any of my experiences to other Scottish schools because I didn't go to any other ones. But St. Andrews itself, not as a town, the town was great, but as a school was bad. My best class was my cetaceans class. The teacher was the nicest. The class was small, and so it was kind of like a Sweetbriar class. The lecture was informal, so we could interrupt if we had questions. There was free discussion at the end of class. It was a really good experience. My other two classes, on the other hand, were large lecture halls, and there was zero incentive to going to class. Neither of those classes, music or history, they didn't have required attendance for lecture. They only had required attendance for tutorial, which you didn't have to be prepared for. I had presentations for tutorial, but they weren't graded. I don't know. It was a bad adjustment for me going from a place that has high expectations of you and expects you to meet them to a place that essentially had zero expectation of you, zero incentive to make you do anything, and then 1,000 pounds of pressure to ace an exam that there's no way you could be prepared for. I only had like 2 grades per class in total until the exam. And it just bothered me a lot because I am the kind of person where I need incentive to study. And I don't mean like, if you study this long, you'll get a candy. I don't mean anything like that. I mean, I need something to work towards, a quiz, a test, classwork, something, and there was never anything like that. Every class had an essay, even cetaceans. The essay was irrelevant. I did my essay on a class about culture in Wales, essentially. My essay was on elephants because it was a critical paper review. It wasn't class specific. I had 3 essays for history, 2 of which were on heavily related subjects. The other one was unrelated, but they were all about very specific topics in the class, but they were the only 3 grades that I had in that class. So I didn't have any information to fall back on for my exam. I cannot confidently say that I left St. Andrews University with a broad knowledge of either music, Scottish music, or the English Empire from 1066 to 1500. I do not have general knowledge of either of those subjects because there was no incentive for me to retain generalized knowledge. There was only incentive for me to be prepared to answer incredibly specific questions that I did essays for. I think it's kind of unfair. Maybe that's how other large schools in America work, and maybe I'm just not used to learning that way, but I think it's a pretty shitty system, and I didn't like it at all. I'm very happy to be going back to Sweetbriar, and that's just my time there. I won't find out my grades or how I did on exams until in June, but that's just my experience. Dallas had it way worse, and I'm not going to talk about her time there because it's not my story to tell, and I don't know all the details, but I do know that she struggled a lot more than me, and she had to deal with a teacher who would call her out for being American. That's not right. But it's these large institutions that have tenure and they don't value students as individuals, so you can't do anything about it. And that's just class-specific problems that we had. We also had trouble with making friends there. The only friends we made while we were there were junior study abroad students, like we were. I made no friends with any full-time students at St. Andrews, and I think that's pretty crappy. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. I could have gone out and I could have been bolder and I could have gone and approached people. I could have done that, and maybe I would have made a few more friends that way. But everyone already had their groups, their cliques, whatever you want to call it, and there was zero opening if I was that kind of person. There was never opportunity to go and talk to anybody. Everybody sat in their own little groups. Nobody approached anybody, and the only time a student that went full-time there ever talk to me was at a wine and cheese thing that our dorm had put on, and a warden had to tell him to do it. That's not okay. At Sweetbriar, if somebody is studying abroad and they come to Sweetbriar, which happens occasionally, believe it or not, everybody is talking to them. Everybody's trying to make them feel welcome. Everybody is trying to make sure that they feel like they belong there and that they made a good choice. And I understand St. Andrews is a larger school. However, the fact that 0 people made an effort to make friends is really disheartening to me. And there was such an air of privilege there. And I never use the word privilege. I don't like the word privilege because it's come to have a lot of connotations. However, there are a lot of stuck-up assholes who went there and thought they were too good for American students, too good for JSAs. Somebody was telling me before we left, another JSA was telling me that they overheard, or maybe it was told to them directly, that they did something. I can't remember what it was. And they heard a full-time student say something like, oh, maybe JSAs aren't all terrible. What would ever give you that impression anyway? It's not like we all come from the same place. It's not like we all come from the same school. Even if we come from the same country, America's huge. If you go from California to New York to Florida to Texas, those are entirely different places. Why would you generalize JSAs, which that's junior study abroad? That doesn't mean you're from America. You can be from other places. Why would you generalize in that way? That was another thing that bothered me a lot. All our other issues were not as troublesome to me. There were some problems with communications from the school being too vague and us not understanding where or what. I don't regret going. If I knew then what I know now, I would have still wanted to study abroad in Scotland, but I probably would have tried to go somewhere else. If anybody at Sweetbriar or anywhere else wants to study abroad in St. Andrews and they want to talk to me, I'm just going to tell them what my experience was. My only recommendation, if you want to go there only needing upper level classes. Don't go there to take gen eds. Don't go there to take lower level subject classes. Don't do it because it's terrible. It's really, really terrible. I have a friend who was in Glasgow while we were in St. Andrews, and she seemed to love it. I haven't talked to her personally yet. I've just seen her social media posts, and we've made comments on each other's things briefly, but I'm going to go with a no. If you want to study abroad, go to Scotland, experience Scotland. It's beautiful. Don't go to St. Andrews. Not for school. I'm sorry that this turned into a little bit of a downer at the end, but I know there's people who will want to know exactly what a summary, what I think, and that's what it is. I mean, I wish it had been all cheery and fun and happy. I did have good times there, and I did meet good people, and there were classes and things that I liked. So it wasn't all bad, but the bad things were very bad. That's just my thoughts. Sorry this turned into a bit of a downer, but that's all I have right now. So if you like this video, hit the like button, or send it to a friend, or subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye! Which was not as tragic and didn't pull my heartstrings as much as I was concerned it was going to, but it was still very compelling, and I'm very excited to see the next Marvel movies following that. And when I went to the theater, I realized X-Men Apocalypse is out, so now I have another movie to go see when I get home. But that's really all I had.